When should you be the most cautious when you're flying around? Like all the time, right? Like you're always at your spider sense is always at 100%, right? Wow, that's kind of unrealistic. Eh. Anyways, welcome to the Superpilotish channel. My name's Graham Wilson, and today I'm going to be talking to you about when to be the most cautious when you're flying around. And here we go, the little backstory that I always do. I was thinking the other day, and it's getting a little bit cooler around here where I live in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And I was thinking, I haven't flown in a little while. Is it right around carburetor icing time? So I was thinking, there's something to be considered with carburetor icing, high humidity, just the right temperature. And yeah, we got a little bit of rain on the way today, so it's like, it could be around that. Yeah, who knows? But then I was thinking again, if you have carburetor ice, okay, that's just one way of having an engine failure if you're not on top of it. But I was thinking, how many times did I actually know people that had actual engine failures? And so I started writing it down, and I got one, two. Oh, him, yeah. Oh, yeah, him too. Him. Oh, yeah. And then I kept thinking of all these people that had engine failures, and so I was like, okay. So what I got to do now is kind of narrow that down. So I'll just. What happens when somebody has an engine failure in an airplane is that most of the time the plane will get on the ground and the pilot walks away. But it's one of these things where the pilots will start second guessing the other pilot, and there's always this little, oh yeah, how long has he been flying for? Well, did he do the maintenance himself on that? What kind of gas was he using? And all these pilots get together and they just start firing questions at each other to get to the bottom of it. What was it? And then it always ends up that I would never do that. But the thing is, yeah, it can happen to anybody. And so I was trying to think, are there any common denominators? So I'm just going to go through, the very first, a few little stories for you. So the very first time they didn't have an engine failure, but they could have. So I was at school learning how to fly. One of the guys in my class got a plane, and he was flying, and he was going to go leave the control zone. And then he said he requested an immediate return back to the airport. And so we were always listening to, in the dispatch area, there was always the radio going. You could hear who was flying around and doing what on the control tower frequency. Why is he coming back? So anyways, he came back, and then of course, like all the pilots do, what happened? What was going on? They got the instant investigation going on as soon as the guy gets out of the airplane. So what happened was he was flying, and the planes that they fly up at the college there where I went to, they have a constant speed propeller. So that requires a certain amount of oil pressure to change the pitch of the blades of the propeller. So he heard that the blades were changing pitch. So it was, usually an airplane's nice and even, but when it changes the pitch of the propeller, so it might get more bite or less bite in the air, it'll make the RPMs change, how fast the engine's going. So he was basically hearing, that doesn't sound right. So he made the right call. And I don't think he even had his license at that point. I think he was still a student. And he came back, and they pulled up to the hangar, and they got a mechanic out there, and they checked the dipstick on the airplane, and there's no oil on the dipstick. So you never want to see that. So what happened was they looked underneath, and there's a big streak of oil underneath the airplane. So what happened there was that somebody, I forget whether it was an oil fitting or like a oil hose or something. Anyway, something in the system to circulate the oil, it was disconnected, and it all leaked out on him. But luckily it leaked out slowly, and he got back and everything was fine. So, and I know someone else that happened to too, but I'm not even counting that one. Yeah, they just noticed that the oil pressure was low, turned around. Yep, same thing. So that can happen. Another one was a friend of mine, John. He just started off as an instructor, and he was flying these ultralights, these advanced ultralights. They look kind of like just like a regular airplane, little airplane, but they're light enough, and they meet the requirements of an ultralight. So an ultralight airplane, there's different requirements for the engines and stuff. Like if you have a fully certified regular airplane, there's certain redundancies that have to be built into the system. Like for example, you got to have dual ignition systems, or you have to have um, an extra fuel pump on there if the fuel pump stops working. So there's different things that are required. And so John was coming into land in his little ultralight with the student there, and he wanted to demonstrate how to do a landing. So he pulled the power back to idle, and the propeller stopped moving. So now he was a glider at this point. And like he was telling me this, and I was pretty fresh out of school myself, and he was a pretty fresh instructor. And I was like, dude, what did you do? He's like, I just went in and landed, because he was right on final. He was all set up to land on the runway, and it just engine stopped though. I'll just glided it right in, and he didn't have time to start it again or anything like that. So what happened there was that it just came out of maintenance, and they didn't adjust the idle speed properly. So when he pulled out the throttle, it shut off too much gas to the engine, and that was on I think it had a Rotax kind of weird engine on there. And then a couple other times, there was speaking of ultralights. Now that wasn't called an advanced ultralight, so it kind of looks like an airplane. But you see those other ultralights, it's basically like kind of like a kite with a motor on it, like them. And I knew of a couple guys there that they had one guy. He made it to the engine actually stopped, and one guy, he landed in a field and busted off one of the he hit some like construction rubble, and he busted off the nose gear on it, but he walked away. And then the other guy, he landed, he was close to a little grass strip that he knew. So he went in and landed, and that was it. So it's like, okay, those are ultralights, and they had their little funny little motors in there too. And oh yeah, I see you guys here. Hey Harold, hey Rich. I'll get to your questions in a bit. Yeah, so and then another time, a couple other things where the maintenance wasn't getting done exactly by a mechanic, and there was a couple other times that, one that I can think of was a crash, another one landed in a field. So I was thinking, okay, in my little accident reconstruction brain, what's the common thread between all these accidents? Luckily, most of them walked away. Unfortunately, one of the ones I was thinking of, the guy did die, but there was sadly, but and then another guy, I can think of him doing that too, but I didn't get the whole story of it, and I didn't really know these guys, but it's still bad when people in the community have accidents like that. So, but we soldier on, and we try to be safe, and we try to spread knowledge just like I'm doing here, so that doesn't have to happen. So, okay, so what was the main cause of all these like accidents? And now these are people that like I knew, or I knew the people that were all around him, and like a lot of discussion was going on. And so, oh, hey, safety dog too. Hey, I'll get your question right at the end. And so the main thread between all these accidents that I was thinking of, and even a few that I'm not really mentioning, was that they just basically, the airplanes had just come out of maintenance. So that makes a lot of sense, where, and they had engine work done on them. So it could be like either a rebuild, or a new engine put in, or some major system got replaced. Anyways, it was kind of like serious engine work that was done. And then looking at it too, the majority of those were the maintenance was done by the pilot themselves, because it was either an ultralight, what do you call it? In the States, it's an experimental classification, or a amateur built in Canada. But basically, there are ways that you can do the same. You can do maintenance on your own airplane, um, but and not have to be a licensed mechanic. And yeah, it kind of seems that, and also the ultralights, they don't have to have the same redundant systems like the certified airplanes have. So it's like, if you really think about if I really think about it, the major thing is if you're doing engine maintenance or some major part like a fuel system, oil system, something like that. If it's an ultralight or an experimental, the Joe's doing maintenance on his own plane and he's not a mechanic. And then, so like, that's really the major ones. And so I would say what you would do now to rectify the situation here. I would say, and I've done this myself whenever we got where I used to work, where we had, if we got a new engine put in, we would do the first, I forget how many hours, 5 hours, I think. We would basically just kind of circle around the airport. We do an extended circuit, or stay in the as the Americans would say, stay in the traffic pattern, and then about 500 feet above the regular pattern altitude, so 1,500 feet above ground. And the air traffic controllers were very accommodating with that. So we just said, okay, we're going to be we're going to be basically going around the circuit at 1,500 feet, and they say, okay, just and then when we started doing that, we were doing like radio calls. Hey, I'm on downwind. They're like, just let us know when you're done. So we were doing like this little rectangle, always within gliding distance of the airplane. So that's what helped out my friend John. That was that he had a proper gliding distance from the airport when he was doing his takeoffs and landings to practice that. So that's it's important to always be gliding distance within the field, and that's why they make that circuit pattern the way it is. So yeah. Oh, and incidentally, my friend John there, he works at Air Canada, and so does this other guy that had the problem with his plane. He graduated. So yeah. Anyways, so I would say just kind of oh, and then another one too is that if you are doing those little, maybe you're just out of maintenance with your engine all redone or some major system redone. Just because you're flying around doing that and everything's looking good, don't just say, oh, I'm going to go buzz off over here and go see what Joe's doing out there, out on his farm or something. Like, what you should do ideally is just fly around, land, take off the cowling, check for oil leaks, check if anything's loose wires, could be anything, give it a good check. And then, even, if you really wanted to too, you could drain out some oil, do an oil change on it, which is probably recommended anyways. And then if you do your oil change, do you cut open your oil filter and take a magnet and look for metal? It's a good idea to do that. And yeah, and so if you are going to do your little test flight, don't deviate from it, because that's why two of the guys had to go into fields that I know, because they said, everything's going great, and whoops, it didn't. So that's the main thing there. So if you are doing your own maintenance on your own airplane, be very careful. Statistically, in my world and what I've seen, you're at really high risk if you're doing a certified, and it could be anyone right out of maintenance. So just kind of keep an eye on that oil temperature and oil pressure if it's right out of maintenance, and don't go too far. If you have the choice, just go do some touch and goes and stuff like that for the first few flights after it comes out of maintenance. That'll work the bugs out of things. And yeah, so that's about it. So now I'll get to the questions. Okay, so here we go. Starting off at the top there with Harold. Do you take a parachute with you ever or at all times? I've never flown with a parachute. There is, and even doing aerobatics, never done that. Now I know in the United States it's a requirement that you fly with a parachute. I'm pretty sure. But here, no, it's never fly with a parachute. And what else we got here? I think, okay, what's Harold say here? I think I wouldn't go up without a way to get downtown in my backpack or down to the ground, maybe in your backpack. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's having a parachute. It is that extra layer of safety, and a lot of people do, even though it's not legally required here in Canada. A lot of pilots that do aerobatics and that, yeah, they'll wear a parachute. And then safety doc. Do you suggest bracing for a crash? Yep, definitely. Um, what would be the best way? It's just like what they say in the like if you're on an airliner and you kind of put your hands up like this. Same thing in a little airplane. The best that you can do. Like I would, like say if you're in the back seat of a like in the planes I used to fly, Cessna 172, they got like some pretty big seats. So I put my head right up against the seat to brace, because that way if you land and you come to a quick stop, your head's not it's not going forward and stopping on the you're not getting that impact with the seat. You have your head right up against it, and then that'll kind of cushion it a little bit better. And they usually do have cushion on the back of the seats for that. And bracing for the crash, yeah, you could even but number one is if you're in a little airplane, make sure your seat belts are as tight as you possibly can get them. Lap belt, shoulder harnesses, whatever, tight, tight, tight. Because if you if you go upside down, like sometimes planes will flip upside down, you could be hanging from the straps, so and then you could have like more pelvic damage and coming to a stop. But yeah, super tight. That's usually you'll get briefed on that before, if there is any type of accident where you do have to go put into a field or something. The pilot will remind you as part of the pre-flight briefing that make sure your seatbelt's on nice and tight. So, and yeah, brace the best you can. Okay, what else we got here? What's this? Harold says, I feel the same way at the top of the Rensen. Oh, okay, well, there you go. That's a Detroit reference. Yeah, Harold lives just across the river from me over here, close to Detroit. And Wrench is saying that home builders get a certification to work on their own plane. I'm not sure if I'm trying to think about that. For certain things, I think you do have to do that, but I've never actually built my own plane, so I can't really comment too much for that. And Wrench does also say Wrench is a pilot in the States, and in the United States, parachutes are required for aerobatic flight. Yep. Okay, and what else we got here? Most pilots never trained in parachute, almost as much training as a pilot. Oh, yeah, like I mean, if you do, yeah. I knew a guy. He was in the airborne, like military. He was in the Army Reserves here in Canada, but he was in like an airborne division, so he did a whole bunch of jumps. And yeah, it's there's a whole technique to learning how to land with the parachute, but. Oh well. And so I mean, I would pilot. It's just so weird for me. Just I don't even know if I could jump out of a plane, even if I had a parachute. Just because like I would just feel so much safer myself, like because I've had thousands of hours teaching people how to glide into fields. I think I'd be able to do it on just about any airplane. But and I still think it would be safer for me. But oh well. But then there's also those airplanes too, the Cirruses. They got a ballistic parachute where you just pull the handle and it blows the top of the plane off, and then the plane comes down on a little parachute. And that's something there too. I still don't think I could ever do that, but that's me. And yep, Harold says it's good to have experts on both sides of the river. Hey, there we go. Expert Harold Cheeseburger. And yeah, so there we go. There's just a little bit today. And what to watch out for. Just be careful when it's out of maintenance. Stay nice and close to the airport just to be safe. And once that happens, hey, after a couple hours, you can be all fat, dumb, and happy up in the sky all you want. So, okay, there we go. Oh, that's right. Wrench is the expert in Kansas, and Harold is a passenger in Detroit. Actually, yeah, Harold, didn't you just go on a big flight a little while ago, a little vacation? So, yeah, we'll have to Well, Harold made it back, so they did a good flight, I guess. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna just kind of shut her down here. Oh, I'm I'm glad that my advice helped you out there, Harold, too. Okay, so we're gonna shut her down. So thank you for watching. Bye.